Welcome everyone to part one of this 10-part course on how to become a tech-aware leader in 10 hours. So in part one, we will be dealing with idea and technology, your idea and the technology, how they fit together. I'll also give some perspectives on how to evolve an idea and how to choose a technology that fits the idea. We'll also look at the person who has this idea and wants to use this technology, which is in this case you. So we'll also look at certain aspects of the person itself and how it affects the idea and technology as well. But before going into the entire part one, I'd like to touch upon the plan for these 10 hours. So let me get this video out of the way. Okay, so the first part, which is today's idea and technology, we'll look at the evolving the idea, we'll look at the technological fit, we'll also look at the person who's embodying the idea and using this technology to make the idea a reality. In part two, we'll look at what should you expect from the technology. What are the expectations that you should have from using technology to make your idea a reality. In part three, we'll go a little bit into the visioning and execution of this whole process. In part four, we'll look at how do you work with the customer. When your idea and the manifested idea touches the customer, things change. And how do you work with that customer and make sure that your idea is adopted and it really helps the customer. So we'll look at that in part four. Part five, we'll look at working with change. What you're doing with manifesting your idea is creating a change in the world of the customer who's going to finally adopt this manifested idea. And how do you work with that change and why is that important? So we'll look at it in part five. Part six was one of the important aspects of using technology to make idea a reality, which is rapid experimentation. How do you experiment and iterate through an idea using the technology very quickly so that you can move the idea and evolve the idea towards what you really want it to be. Right? Seventh hour, or part seven, would be about generating insights and learning from the action. So you'll be taking a lot of actions in this process of marrying the idea and the technology and making it a reality, putting it in front of the customer, managing or helping the customer manage the change, and also working with the things that don't work, which is the failures and the learnings from the failures using rapid experimentation. So there are a lot of insights that are generated in this process. So how do you learn from those and incorporate them into further iterations of your idea? Part eight is mainly about making the ideas and solutions a habit. Now, these are innovations. This is almost embodying the ethos of an innovation that is very important for people who work with technology. So we'll look at how to make that a habit. In part nine, we'll look at how do you make technology serve you. A lot of times the technology overwhelms us and it feels almost like a master than something that serves us and our ideas. So how do you really put all this together to make technology serve you? And then 10, finally, we'll look at how do you become an innovator as you start using technology. That means you become familiar with how to leverage technology to manifest your ideas. So this continuous marriage of ideas and technology, how do you make it work for you? And that's what we'll look in part 10. So that's the 10-part course, and we're going to look at part one. The whole system of you trying to manifest your idea using technology has three large parts to it, right? It's you, there is the technology, and there's the idea. Of course, the idea is the one that holds centrality to the whole process, but there are these three entities interacting with each other and changing each other. So you, the way you are works and changes the technology that you're using, the technology you're choosing. It also affects the idea that you're bringing to the table. Similarly, the idea affects the technology and you as a person, its success, its failures, the way it manifests, etc. So it is very important to understand each of these aspects and each of these entities, how they interact with each other and how they affect each other. So the central part of this today's chapter is about this interaction, about understanding each of these entities in a deeper way. So let's first start with idea, right? They say everything begins with an idea. So an idea could be anything. It could be a business idea. It could be a problem that you're solving within a context of an organization. It could be something that you want to manifest for your own self, for your own benefit, personal benefit. So it could be any of these things. It need not be, when we say an idea, there is this larger than life image in our head typically. At least for me, it's been the case for a long time. And we get thoughts about Steve Jobs or an Elon Musk or Edison or Einstein. So these are giants of history that have affected what an idea means, or even Archimedes shouting Eureka, jumping out of his bathtub, right? But I want us to make it more real, more practical, more at home with the concept of an idea. It is anything that manifests or wants to manifest a change in the world. So it could be as simple as a new way of doing the same thing, of running a process in your organization. It could be a problem that your company is facing or you are facing and you want to solve it. It could be an idea that potentially becomes a new business, or it could be an idea that lives within an organization, or it could be an idea on a product that changes it and makes it a new feature, or it could be something very big that changes the world, right? So it could be any of these things, and it's still an idea. But that's the key. The key part of the previous sentence was the idea by itself is not an end to in itself. It is a means for something. I was mentioning about how you want to create or impact something in the world out there. Hence, the purpose of an idea is to make a difference in the real world. And that's why just having an idea doesn't make much of a difference, but manifesting that idea is what really creates the difference. So then the question comes, what would be a good idea, right? So in my view, I use this model, or I've been using this model for some time, which I've created, called an idea should serve, solve, and satisfy. It should pass this 3S test. Serving means it should serve some, some part of what a customer wants, a need of a customer. It should serve the customer. That means it should have a customer and it should serve the customer. Second, it could solve some problem. It could solve a pre-existing problem, or it could solve a problem that is, is important for you and for the customer. And the third, it should satisfy some form of demand, that either latent demand or obvious demand that is known. For example, I think one of the pictures here on the top left corner is of a assembly line, and that's a new way of doing things. I mean, it did not fundamentally add to what was being done, but it changed the way things were being done. Before the assembly line or a production line came up, things were all artistic. Artisans would sit and make things the way they want to, and the entire product is made by one person or a couple of people. So the assembly line, it broke down that whole process and into small component processes, component activities that work with each other and create the final product. So no single person is making the final product. So it served a particular purpose, and the purpose was that it made production mass activity. Mass production became a reality. It even spawned the whole industrial revolution. So that became an interesting and a very important concept to get manifested. So that was an idea. It should, of course, solve a problem. Right? Like, for example, Uber was an idea that came up and solved the problem of there are a lot of cars out there that are not being used, and there are a lot of people who need those cars to go from point A to point B. And the only thing that are serving that particular demand of moving people from point A to point B were the taxis. So Uber came along and then said, there is a latent demand here for vehicles, and there is a supply that is being unused. How do we match them together? And that solved that problem. And we have now very ubiquitous Uber or Ola in India that solved that problem. Also satisfying a demand, which iPhone did in a brilliant way. And it said there is a demand for the phones to be very user-friendly, very intuitive, and not something that somebody needs to spend hours to learn how to operate, right? So that satisfied that particular demand. So these are examples of the 3S model being adapted to various ideas in the world out there. So what I would want you to do now is maybe pause the video, or you can do this exercise after watching the video. I'll leave it up to you. But do this exercise about, maybe journal it, saying, what's the big idea you've been working on? Or what's a big idea that you have and you've not worked on so far? And also write down, who does it serve? What problem does it solve? And what demand does it satisfy? So this is an exercise of reflection on your own idea, and it'll apply the 3S model to it and see if it reveals any further insights in the process. And you could share those insights on the Facebook group as well. And so we talked about the idea, but like I mentioned earlier, an idea is only a beginning. Great idea is worth nothing if it is not executed, right? So there is this whole philosophy of everybody has ideas, and but very few people go ahead and execute them, right? So the execution becomes really important, and not just execution, but persistent execution. The reason I'm saying persistent execution is because if you just have an idea and execute it, doesn't mean that it gets manifested, it will serve the customer. But the first touch with the customer of any product, any idea, typically fails, because our estimate of what a customer wants, what problem we're solving, is not always right in the first time. That's why there needs to be that iteration, that working through with an idea and executing it. There is this persistence in executing it, iterating it, making it better. And hence the importance of the technology to enable that process. And we'll talk about more when we look at technology. And now let's look at we looked at the idea. We said we look at three things: idea, you, and the technology. Now let's look at you. And I call this your SVaG. Again, three aspects to you. One is your innovation style. How do you innovate? Because for me, like, doesn't matter if you're solving a small problem or you're creating a product that'll change the world, or you are creating a new way of doing the same thing. It is innovation, right? So what's your innovation style that affects your idea or the way you interact with the world out there that leverage your ideas, the way you'll interact with the technology, and the way you will manifest marrying the idea and technology, right? So that we'll talk about that innovation style. The second is values, or I'm using the word values here to mean what is important for you. Why are you doing this? The why behind it, right? The why behind why you want to execute this idea, why you want to make it a success. We'll talk about that. The third thing is the goals. What are your goals in making this happen? What do you want to achieve? And we'll talk about that as well. So that's about the you. Then finally, the technology itself, right? So we talked about the idea, we talked about making the idea a reality, and of course, you're the one who's doing it. So the gap between the idea and reality is bridged by the technology. And that is where the current world is transformed itself, where literally every idea needs some form of technology to make it real. Right? So how do you bridge that gap is um, the key thing, the important thing. And that's where the idea and technology fit really becomes important. If you have an idea, but if you have the wrong technology or inappropriate technology, then you will struggle through making it happen. And even choosing the technology becomes an iterative process. And hence the technology and idea fit becomes really important. And similarly for technology, I have three aspects of technology that make it a good fit. Again, I call it the three E's. One is, does the three questions rather, does the technology evolve the idea? Does the technology enable an idea? Does the technology enhance an idea? So those are three aspects that are really important to be answered, and we'll look at them deeper to make it a good fit. For example, I think RPA was an idea that was really old. I mean, it was there back in late 90s, I would say, in the form of testing automation. But it could be adapted and used in the business context to create efficiency and effectiveness only once it became accessible through low code. So essentially, you could think of democratizing RPA, where even the business users can start using RPA to create automations. So the technology of low code actually made RPA possible. Similarly, artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence has been around for, I think, probably a good 60, 70 years. We are familiar with the early versions of it as neural networks, and making machines do the work like a brain or think like a brain, right? So the whole AI became a possibility at a consumer level and not in some research lab, only when cloud computing became a reality. And now you're able to run very complex, very resource intensive algorithms and supply that to front-end mobile phone that somebody is carrying over a network and access the result of it. So for example, you could be using Google Translate to speak into the machine, like the mobile phone, and it tells you what is being, it translates it into some other language. That's possible through very complex artificial intelligence algorithms that are running on Google machines, Google servers, sitting somewhere else, and that's because of cloud computing. So the technology of cloud computing enabled and enhanced the artificial intelligence as an idea and made it happen. So we'll look at this a little deeper as we go along, the three aspects of evolve, enable, and enhance. So now let's go deeper. So we have three aspects, the U, the idea, and the technology, and we looked at, for each of these, there are three more aspects that we will go deeper into. So for the idea, it is, we talked about serving, solving, and satisfying. So let's look at each of these aspects to understand a little bit further. For example, an idea needs to serve customers' needs. And the way you can find this out is by looking at what are the jobs a customer is getting done, maybe not in a very effective or efficient way, but still the job is being done. So can this idea help this customer to do this job a lot better? For example, let's say you could have a small business running a website and managing customers, and they're managing customers, customer information through a spreadsheet, and they're capturing the customer information that is coming in through various channels. It could be telephone calls, it could be emails, it could be mobile referrals through, say, a social platform like LinkedIn, etc. And somebody's sitting out there collecting all this, putting it into a spreadsheet, and there is also a website that they have, and they're using that the spreadsheet as a form of CRM, if you will, right? So obviously they're getting the job done of managing the customer relationship and managing the customer data, but it's not done effectively and efficiently. So what can you do to integrate all this various inputs that this particular small business is getting to create a system that'll work seamlessly with the website, that'll work seamlessly with the email, with phone calls, with LinkedIn, and collect all the customer information in a standardized format without too much human intervention, without having to jump around various sources. So that's serving the customer's need. So when an idea serves the customer's needs, it makes it more efficient, it makes it more effective to do the job, it makes it more seamless. So the process of capturing this would be to figure out, what are the jobs that the customers are doing, but not so effectively and efficiently. And again, the customers, when I use the word customer, it could be an internal customer, it could be a business that you are working with, or a business function that you're working with internally as well. So I don't mean just external customers. So the second part of the 3S test was the idea needs to solve some unsolved problem. So a problem is unsolved, it's leading to suffering and pains for the targeted customer. Can this idea that you have solve a problem that make the pains go away? So there are pains that are being experienced because a problem is not solved. And you can take any example of, for example, Google solved a big problem, right? So there was a lot of information available across the world, but that information was not indexed, and you had to know the name of a website before you went and accessed it. You had to know the name of the specific location of what website that will give you a particular article you're pursuing or whatever. So Google solved that big problem, and it came up with this whole concept of indexing all the knowledge out there in the world, information, websites, and it became a single point of interface for you to access the knowledge and information and data available on the internet, right? So that problem was not solved, and that was solved. So, and because of that, there was a lot of pains and suffering that users of the internet faced before Google. So think about what is that specific problem the idea is solving, and what pains will it make to go away. And finally, the third part of the 3S model is the idea should be able to satisfy some demand. It could be latent, I'm calling it latent here, but it could be an obvious demand as well. But there is an unsatisfied demand. Customers either know or don't know the demand, right? So how can an idea, what demand does your idea satisfy? And what demand of the customer? And is that latent, or is that known to the customer? So that becomes an important aspect of the idea. So to facilitate this process, I use this value proposition canvas that was developed by SVaG, and he was a professor in Switzerland. He came up with this whole value proposition canvas, and it's got two parts to it. One part is the value map of the product. That is, what is the product and services that you have? What are the gain creators and the pain relievers? Now, before that, you need to know what are the gains and the pains that the customer has, right? So on the right-hand side is the customer profile. So the customer profile has three parts to it, which is gains, jobs, and pains. Jobs are things that the customer is doing somehow, but not in a very effective and efficient manner. So they are getting the job done, but in a probably a painful way, right? So what are the pains that you're going to avoid by getting this job done more effectively and efficiently? That's a list of the pains. And what are the gains the customer is going to get by getting this job done in a different way? What are there additional gains, not just avoiding the pain, but what is the benefit that the customer is going to get? And then you map that to your products and services, the gain creators and pain relievers, that will give you the value proposition canvas for the idea. So it could be an internal problem that you're solving. It could be a business idea. It could be a feature in a product. This is applicable for any of those scenarios. And I would encourage you to kind of use this template to put your idea and test the fit of your idea with what the customer is doing in the form of jobs, the gains that they will get, and the pains that they are facing, and how they'll be relieved. What I'm going to do is, put this template into the Facebook group so that you can use it. But if you're not part of the Facebook group, it's very easy to get it off the internet. It is called the Value Proposition Canvas by Professor Alexander Osterwalder. Okay, so the exercise is to use this template to map your customers' pains, gains, and jobs to your gain creators, pain relievers, and products and services. And you can pause this video and do it, or you can do it after the entire session. But I would highly encourage you to do it because it is very revealing. It reveals how the idea, fits with what the customer wants, at least the first pass of it. And it's extremely important for you to do. And the way you could get what the customer wants is either by observing them, either through some surveys, either through talking to them, but you need to figure that out before you make this fit. Now let's look at the evolution of an idea, the entire process of the idea getting converted to something that manifests in the real world and moving to finally redundancy. So there are about 7 steps in this process. First is, of course, having an idea. And more often than not, you have some other idea that solves a problem in your organization, in your market, in your business, etc. Now, the second step is converting that idea into an innovation, into something that is more tangible, something that solves the problem in a fashion that addresses certain aspects of the customer's pains and gains, right? So that is what is called as innovation. Now that's a next level of evolution of the idea. So an idea could be, for example, let's take the case of Google. I want to index everything that's available on the internet. So that's an idea. Now the innovation is the search engine, saying, how do I do that? The how is the innovation part. So the innovation becomes the search engine saying, okay, I want to index everything, but how do I do it? I create something called a search engine that's going to go figure out, what is out there in the internet, and it's going to collect that. And when somebody comes in and types in a query on the Google page, it's going to go search for what is relevant for that query and present that information in a consumable format. So that's all the how of it. So innovation is the how of the idea. Now the third step is experimentation, right? So once the innovation happens and once it is in some form of a minimum viable product, then you're going to expose this to the customer. So it said that no idea survives the first exposure to the customer. So when you expose that to the customer, it typically fails. And it could fail due to different reasons, right? It could fail because certain aspects of the gains are not addressed and it's not motivating enough for the customer to adopt it. It could fail because some important pains have been missed out and the customer is like, this is not helping me. Or it could fail because some of the work that the jobs that the customer is doing still remain and they are not addressed by the innovation and it fails. So that's the experimentation bit. And that's where typically iterations happen, failures happen, learning from failures happen, and iterations happen. Then finally, the final version of the product is put out there and it is adopted by the customer. And this adoption could be in the form of internal adoption, where it becomes steady state, business as usual, etc. Or it could be adoption by a market segment and it's become a business. Or it could be a feature function in a particular product and it is being used. So you need to be able to figure out, the levels of adoption of this idea that is now become mainstream. And the fourth step would be, is that a differentiator? Is that a differentiator for you as a business? Is that a differentiator for the business function that you're serving? Or is that a differentiator for the product? Is that creating some differentiation or not? And then finally, it gets copied by multiple players in the market, and it becomes a commodity. So everybody figures out the technology. So for example, now the Uber was a differentiator. It was obviously experimented on, adopted by a particular market. It was a big differentiator, but now it's becoming a commodity because people have figured out what to do with that business model, and it's becoming more of a commodity. And then finally, the last step is the idea becomes redundant because it is no longer relevant, or something else has come and disrupted it and taken over that particular process. For example, now you have this whole blockchain, and that has created cryptocurrencies, and it's kind of past the experiment stage, and probably early adoptions are happening of it, and it has not yet come to a differentiator and become a commodity, obviously. But its counterpart, which is the traditional currency that is being used, could soon become redundant because the cryptocurrency has come and disrupted that particular business or that particular idea, that particular model. In fact, currency probably is one of the ideas that has gone on for hundreds of years now without getting disrupted. So we are yet to see whether truly cryptocurrency will disrupt this long-standing idea. So that's about the idea. So we looked at the idea in detail, the 3 S's of the idea, how it should serve, solve, and satisfy. And also we looked at the evolution of an idea. Now let's move on to the third gear, or the third part of the system, which is you. And like I mentioned earlier, the 3 parts to this again. One is, of course, your style, what is important for you, your values, and what are the goals that you're trying to achieve by manifesting this idea. So let's look at the style. And by style, what I mean is, what type of an innovator are you? And in my view, there is this 4-part model that I use to figure out what type of innovator you are. And in my view, there are 4 types of innovators. One is, of course, the troubleshooter. My apologies for jet flight going by. It creates a lot of noise. So 4 types of innovators. The first one is a troubleshooter. Second was the artist. Third is the curious child, and finally is the strategist. Troubleshooter is somebody who says, okay, I need to look at what's happening right now, what's happening in the here and now, find a problem, fix it, and that's what my focus is on. So that's that's one type of an innovator. They're looking for quick fixes, short-term solutions to something that is like they're looking for burning platforms. So I look for a burning platform, I solve the problem, and that gives them the high. The artist is more of somebody who looks at the long term, or somebody who's more focused on creating and leaving a legacy. And they are typically people who pioneer and experiment with new ideas and technology, and they're super happy with that. Most of the corporate citizens fall into the first group, which is the troubleshooter. There are few people who fall into the pioneer artist kind of a group, like the pioneers of blockchain or cryptocurrency. They are artists. They are people who came up with something that never existed, and they created something. Typically, the troubleshooters use existing technology. So they have ideas, but they use off-the-shelf software, off-the-shelf technology to solve problems, and create value for the business. That's a very important part of evolving a particular business, and the troubleshooter contributes to that. Artists, they happen once in a while, they create this great legacy, leave it behind. But of course, for every artist that is successful, every artistic idea that is successful, there are a lot of them that fail. So the third one is a curious child. Now, this is a type of an innovator that is very happy with tinkering with things, finding out how things work. The knowledge, the learning, that's the thirst that they have, and they're continuously asking this question of what's behind this? How does this work? I need to figure that out. And it doesn't matter for them if there is a problem or not. It doesn't matter for them if they're creating something and leaving a legacy or not. As long as they're able to unpack something, ask questions, seek answers, figure it out, and satisfy the thirst that they have for knowledge. And finally, the strategist. Strategists continuously ask the question, how do I envision, how do I create a vision and respond to this environment? So they are always looking at systemic responses, responses to within the system. And typically they look at, how do I span the boundaries in the system? How do I work with across the boundaries in the system? So for example, supply chain problems are a great idea, a great example of boundary spanning problems. They typically span across boundaries. So that's why you have a lot of these supply chain software companies building products that are strategic in nature. Okay, an exercise for you is to kind of reflect on what type of innovator are you? What do you think based upon the explanation so far? Write down what you think based on this discussion. Also, I would say, make this observation for a week and see what comes up for you. Are you looking at troubleshooting more often than not, the ideas that you have, or problems that particular system is facing in the here and now? Are you somebody who's worried about leaving a legacy, something that people would remember you by? Are you somebody who's very interested in gaining knowledge about how things work? Or are you somebody who's looking at solving very complex boundary spanning problems, right? So that will tell you what type of innovator you are. Now, why is this important? This is important because it kind of determines your proclivities towards technology, towards specific types of ideas. Now, my recommendation is, one, of course, become aware of where you are, who you are, what type of style, innovation style you have, but also think of becoming agile about this style, developing an innovation style agility, because each of these personas, each of these types of innovators are solving different types of problems. And what that means is you don't always get opportunities or problems to solve which might fit your style. That means you might need to adapt to the situation and figure out, how do I adapt myself and create a style agility? So one more exercise I would recommend you to do is, if you have seen that your ideas fall into one of these buckets, can you look for something else that is out there that you would want to solve, that is not in your comfort zone, that is not conforming to your innovation style? So that's a question you could ask yourself and work on that. So that way you can develop this style agility that will help you in opening your mind and eyes towards the opportunities available out there that might not fit your style. So the third aspect of this, or sorry, the second aspect of you is, why is this important for you? And I would like you to, again, write that down, journal about, why is this successful implementation of an idea important for you? That's what I call as value mining. That is mining for the importance, the motivations you have. What's behind this zeal you have for successfully implementing this idea, the solution, this problem solving, this new process? Why is this important? I would encourage you to go beyond external importance or importance to your organization. Why is it personally important for you? What does that give you? And some of that also will inform you about your style agility. For example, if your answer is, I get a lot of pleasure from learning about things, from learning about new things, then probably your style is a curious child. Or if your answer is, it's because this idea helps me work with multiple people across different organizational boundaries and solve a very complex problem, then probably you're a strategist. Or if you're like, hey, this gives me a kick whenever I put out fires, then you're probably a troubleshooter. Or if your answer is, I want to leave a legacy behind in this organization or in this market or in this society, and that's going to give me the internal satisfaction I need, then you probably are an artist. So that will also inform you, but it's what your style agility is. But it's important that you figure out why it is important for you. What is in it for you to make this idea successful? What makes this important right now is the question I would like you to answer for yourself. Again, you can pause this video, journal that, answer that question, or do it later. I'll leave that up to you, but it's very important that you do this. That'll inform you about your own self. Then finally, your goals. And I believe there are 3 types of goals that would help you to explore. When I say the goals here, what I mean is the goals from the success of this idea. What are the goals that you want to achieve from making this idea successful? If this idea is successful, what are the goals it'll achieve for you? The first one is the obvious goal. Obvious goal is, okay, I make this idea successful. It's going to make sure that this business does this activity, this process more efficiently, more effectively. Or this customer is going to get rid of this pain, or this particular market segment is going to benefit in this particular way. That's the obvious goal. The identity goal is, how do you want to be seen when you implement this idea? Right? That's an identity goal. How do you want to be seen by your customer as? For example, if you think of Steve Jobs, you have a particular identity in mind. You have a very maverick, brilliant, genius identity in mind. If you think about some other innovator like Elon Musk, you have different, Bill Gates, a different identity in mind. Right? So what is that identity you want to create? I know these are examples that are very lofty and larger than life, but this is a goal that is important for us as well, irrespective of the scale of our idea and what level we are working on. What is the identity you want to create for yourself through the success of this idea? Then finally, the career goal. How will this idea or the success of this idea advance your career? What is it? How will it impact your career? And the answer to this identity and career could be, I don't have a goal, or I don't know how. But it's important you ask that question, and if it is revealing something for you, and that reflection is helping you gain a bit of more insight into who you are, that's what this is designed for. So like I said, write down the goals for this idea. That's like another exercise. So pause this video, write that down. And one more suggestion is probably iterate through the goals, because these are questions that you more likely than not have not asked yourself. So I would suggest iterate through these goals over the next 1 week. So the parts of the exercise, one is of course writing down the goals for this idea, and you might not get the goals very clearly right in the beginning, in the first iteration. So I would invite you to iterate through these goals over, say, a 1 week period of time, because these are questions that we typically don't ask ourselves, saying, what's the identity goal I have from the success of this idea, or what's a career goal I have? Typically, we are only at the obvious goal. Even that might not be 100% clear. So it's good to iterate through this, let it simmer at the back of your mind, and you can go through that. Finally, let's look at the technology fit, right? How does the technology evolve, enable, and enhance the idea? We talked about the 3 components of the technological fit. So let's go a little deeper into this. The first is, of course, technology should evolve an idea further. And the questions you would need to ask when you are picking a technology is, does the technology help move the idea along the cycle of evolution? Does it help you through innovation, through experimentation, through adoption, through making it a differentiator, through making it commodity or even redundancy, right? The life cycle of an entire idea. Does the technology help you? I mean, this could be a question you could ask your technology vendor, your technologist, or just yourself to research, right? So these are questions that will give you insights into how this technology functions. And that's what gives you the familiarity that you're looking for with technologies. The second question is about how the technology would help you manage the various stages of idea evolution. Would it give you, what kind of intelligence would it give you? What kind of data would it provide at each of these stages? How will it help you identify that these are the stages you are at? Some of the early stages aspects that become really important are, how do you learn from failures? How do you capture failure data, iteration data from an idea, especially when it is adopted by the customer and when there is feedback flowing through the various channels from the customer, and how do you use that to learn and adopt and adapt the idea? So, for example, like in one of my previous jobs, I was heading an automation center of excellence, and one of the questions we were asking there was the RPA technology that we're adopting. Does it help us get intelligence about the usage? So it's not just about using, but does it give us that level of intelligence? The final question is, does the technology help you take decisions along this evolution? You need to take decisions saying, okay, I have iterated. How is this iteration performing? I have put it out to the customer. How is the customer adopting? Is the customer adoption levels to what I want? Can I put KPIs around customer adoption? Can I put some KPIs around the feedback that is coming up, and how do I use the feedback? Does it help capture the feedback in a structured manner and disseminate the feedback in a way that can be used to evolve the idea? Does it help to figure out, what kind of evolution that the idea needs to go through so that it can become a differentiator? How do I keep it updated? Those kind of things. So it becomes really important to take those decisions, and the technology needs to help you on those decisions. The second piece, which is of the 3E framework for the technological fit, is, does the technology enable the idea? And there are three aspects that are important here. One is rapid experimentation. Does it enable rapid experimentation at low cost? Can I do what if scenarios in this technology? Can I do A/B testing using this technology? Does the technology help you iterate using the learnings from failure? That's something we talked about earlier as well, saying, can I do version control? Can I iterate through it? Can I compare multiple iterations? Can I figure out correlations between adoption and iterations? I've changed something and the customer adoption went up. I've changed something, the customer adoption went down. Is it really correlated? Can I figure that out? Does it enable capture data from those customer interactions? The customer could be providing information explicitly or implicitly, usage information, especially with technologies that now live on the cloud. Right? So that becomes another important aspect. Then finally, does the technology enhance the idea? Three aspects to the enhancing. One is, does it help you scale up and down very quickly? For example, the technology you're adopting, let's again take the case of an RPA, then I could put RPA on the cloud, or I could put it on-prem on hardware that we purchased. But let's say my consumption of RPA goes up, can I scale up and down the infrastructure very quickly without much cost? Can I scale up and down the customers that I'm onboarding without much cost? Can I scale up and down the number of transactions without adding much cost? Those are the questions you would need to ask. The second question would be about the reach. Does it help the idea reach wider versus a very narrow audience? If I need to add a different segment of my market, is it easy or is it difficult? If I want to widen the reach in terms of the feature functions, is it easy or difficult? If I want to deepen within a particular segment and give them more to work with, is it easy or difficult? And finally, does it create differentiators for your idea, right? Does it help you create entry barriers from the idea being copied very easily or being commodified? So does it help you create differentiators for your idea? Does it help you create entry barriers from other competitors copying the idea if you're a business? Does it help give unfair advantage for a business function that you're serving within an organization? So those are the questions you might want to ask when doing a technological fit. So an exercise for you, we'll go through this further in the next few chapters as well. But an exercise at this point for you is to take these questions and just try and answer these questions. Again, you might not get answers for all the questions, and you might have further questions on these questions and the reflections that we are having. But that's something that we will look at in the future chapters. For now, I would like you to take these questions, and I'll put this PPT on the Facebook group as well so that you have access to it. You can take these questions and figure out answers to them with respect to your idea. If you already have a technology chosen, then you can ask these questions to that technology. If you don't have a technology chosen, if you have a few options, then you can use this template of 3 E's, the framework, to compare and contrast various technologies. If you have no idea about what technology to choose to fit your idea, you can take these questions and see what technologies are out there that will help you make a decision of choosing the technology. So those are various ways you can use this framework. I hope this has been a helpful session for you, and I look forward to seeing you in the next session as well. Until then, have a great learning, and I hope you benefit from the exercises and reflections, and I would strongly encourage you to share those reflections on the Facebook group if you feel drawn to it. Thank you.